Welcome to the channel Trim It Color. In this series we are going to create this vintage pocket watch. We are going to do the modeling and unwrapping in Maya, texturing in Substance Painter, extracting all the maps from Substance Painter, and then finally rendering it in Maya. In this particular video we are going to do the modeling in Maya. In this series I am assuming you know the basics of Maya and Substance Painter. So let's get started. Let's go to Polymodeling and select a cube. Coming back to my shelf and scaling up the cube a little bit. Going to Mesh, going to the Smooth option box, and let's give 3 subdivisions. You can see the object is smooth, but still the 4 corners are visible. It is not exactly a sphere. So going to Deform and applying a Sculpt Deformer, pressing 4, and you can see inside it there is a sphere. Just scale it up a little bit, and now we are getting a perfect sphere. So this is the way you can convert a cube into a sphere. Here I have deleted the history, so there is no deformer anymore inside. Let's scale it up a little bit. Going to the front view and scale down from the y-axis, just giving it a shape of the pocket watch, bringing it up on the grid. Now I want to convert it into 2 parts, so selecting the middle loop, going to Edit Mesh and Detach. Now going to the object mode, going to Mesh and Separate, and you can see the object is divided into 2 different objects. Going to Edit, Delete by Type History, and now going to the outliner of it, and you can see in a group 2 objects are there. I want both the objects independent, so just drag it out. Select the object, pressing Insert in the keyboard, snapping the pivot point to this vertex, and just rotate it. And you can see now I am getting the shape of the pocket watch. Creating a new layer and just add selected object to this layer. Now selecting this open edge, going to Mesh and Fill Hole, and now you can see the object is closed. Selecting this face and clicking on Extrude, scale it down a little bit, once again Extrude, pulling it up, once again Extrude, once again scaling it down a little bit, giving it a thickness, once again Extrude, pulling it up, once again Extrude, once again scaling it down a little bit, once again giving the thickness, again Extrude and push it inside, once again Extrude, and this time scaling it up a little bit, once again Extrude, moving it downward, scaling it down. Once again Extrude and pushing it downward, scaling it down and keeping it inside. Once again Extrude, and this will be the last extrusion, and scale it down. Alright, and you can see we are getting the shape of the bottom cover of the pocket watch. Now I'll just split this area and we'll convert everything into quads by using multi-cut tool. Alright, pressing 3 in the keyboard for the smooth preview, and you can see the edges are also smooth. I want the edges hard, so selecting all the possible hard edges, going to Edit Mesh and Bevel, increasing the fraction a little bit and make sure the segment is 2. Once again press 3, and now you can see the object is smooth but we are getting hard edges. Click on the other part of it, and I'm creating another layer, and let's keep this object also in the layer. Alright, now select this object and let's keep the rotation 0 so that it will be convenient for us to do the extrusion. So extruding the object, going to the front view and let's align it properly. Now, because the object is black, just select the object, go to Mesh Display and reverse. So the normals are to the outer side and the object is appearing correct. Now the object is selected, going to Edit and Duplicate. Scaling it down a little bit, and I'm keeping it inside in such a way so that it can fit the outer cover. Now for these objects also I need to do bevel, so selecting the outer edges and going to Edit Mesh and Bevel. Going to do the same thing for the second object. Let's keep the second object also inside the layer. Now I want to rotate both the caps. So selecting the second one because I need to change the pivot point by holding D and snapping to the vertex and changing the pivot point. And now let's rotate both the caps. Now let's hide the caps from the layer and we'll only concentrate on the bottom part. Going back to the polymodeling and let's create a circular plane. Align it first. And then scale it up a little bit. The object is selected, go to its inputs and change the subdivision to 4. Select all the faces, go to the shelf and extrude. Move it up a little bit to give it a thickness. Now the object is selected, go to Modify and Freeze Transformation, and you can see all the translation values are 0. Go to Edit and Duplicate and let's keep it aside. Now I will be working with this object and later on I am going to use the second one. Now let's select the faces at the center and let's extrude it. Convert it into global axis and scale it down. Making it very small, once again let's extrude it and pull it up and scaling it down. So I am trying to find out the center point of this circular shape. Let's delete this one and let's create a duplicated version of this and I will keep it aside. Once again going to the polymodeling and I will take a couple of polygonal primitive and I will arrange it according to my design. Now taking a cube and let's align it correctly. Now let's create a curve. In the direction I want to extrude. Let's modify it a little bit. Align the curve also. That's fine. Now selecting the face, shift select the curve and extrude. Just increasing the division and you can see I'm getting the shape in the direction of the curve. And let's place it over there according to our design. I'm duplicating this object also and just keeping it aside. Alright, now let's arrange more objects in the same manner. The reason I'm creating all these shapes is to extract these shapes from that circle, and then only we'll get the design in the reference image we can see. Alright, so I have created all these shapes. Now let's go to Mesh and Boolean, selecting the circle, shift select one shape and click on difference. And you can see through Boolean we have extracted that cylindrical shape from this circle. So similarly, I'm extracting all these shapes from this circle to get the shape we want in the reference image. This is looking fine to me, and we don't want that triangulated part, so just selecting the faces and delete. Selecting the curves also and delete. You can see we are getting the shape we want, but one part is still remaining, so this time I am going to use that second circle. And in the value, keep it 0, so it will come back in its previous position. So once again, in this case also, I'll be using a couple of primitives and I'll be using Boolean to get the desired shapes. So let's speed up the process a little bit. In this case, just select the object, go to Deform, Non-Linear and assign Flare. Rotate it approximately 90 degrees. And let's increase the start flare a little bit and giving a little bit value in the curve to get a shape something like this. Alright, and now I'm going to modify it by selecting the components. Now once again select the circle, shift select the shape, going to Boolean, and this time I am using intersection because this is the intersected point. And you can see I got the shape I wanted. So just select this, separate it so that all the objects are individual. But you can see in the resulting surface of Boolean, the topology is incorrect. So many areas I can see triangles and pentagons, so we need to rectify it. Let's open a notepad and let's write a script called Remesh. R should be capital and it should be ended by a colon. Just copy it. Minimize, select the object you want to remesh and paste it in the script editor. Make sure the mail is selected and enter. And you can see we have changed the topology, but it is still incorrect. Doing some adjustments. Refine threshold, let's make it 0.5 and you can see it is looking better. And reduce threshold, let's make it 5 and you can see we are getting the shape better. So similarly, same thing I'm going to do for all the three objects. Alright, but still one problem is there, and that is all the polygons are triangles. We want all the polygons as quads. So let's go back to our notepad and let's write another script, and that is poly-retopo. R should be capital and it should be ended by a colon. So once again, just copy it, select the object and paste it in the script editor. And now you can see we are getting a nice topology and you can decide the maximum poly count you want for this particular object. So let's make it 300 for this particular object, even it can be 200. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing for other two objects also. Let's speed up the process a little bit. That's fine. You can see we are getting a very cleaner topology, and now selecting all the open edges of each and every objects, and we'll go to edit mesh and bevel with 2 segments. Alright, so you can see all the 3 pieces are ready. So clicking off the isolate selection, and you can see gradually we are getting the shape of that machine. Now let's create another circular plane. Scaling it up a little bit, and this is going to be the second layer of that machine. I'm keeping it aside, and let's extrude. That's fine, and once again bringing back to its place. Alright, now for this plane also I'll create a couple of primitives, and I'm going to Boolean it like the previous plane. So let's go a little bit faster. So you can see the second plane is also ready. Now I am going to remesh it, and then let's retopo it. Once again, by selecting the outer edges, I am going to bevel it. So the same process I am repeating what I just have done for the first plane. This is alright. Now let's create the gears. For that, I am taking a cylinder, scaling it down in the y-axis, and let's change the subdivision axis up to maybe 40. You can create the gear from the primitive itself, but here I am just showing you how to model it. So going to the front view and selecting all the side faces, and then click on Extrude. Make sure keep faces together should be off, and scaling it down, and you can see I am getting the shape of the gear. Select the center vertex, control right click, 2 faces and 2 faces. So the containing faces are selected. Once again control right click, 2 edges, just deselect the middle edges. So only that circular loop is selected. Now just going to bevel it. Alright, and you can see one gear is ready. Now let's go to modify and freeze transformation. And also I'm duplicating it and keeping it aside so that later on, if necessary, I can use it. And now let's position it at its proper place. And similarly, I am going to create other gears. So a little bit fast forward over here also. Maybe you were thinking I could have duplicated the first one only, but I didn't do that because the number of teeth is different for both the gears, and that is the reason I extruded it once again. You can see I am creating a different variation over here. So now I am just duplicating the gears and positioning it correctly. Okay, so we almost have created all the gears, and now let's come to this particular gear and let's create a bridge. So selecting a face from this side, and let's select other face from just the opposite side, and let's go to edit mesh and bridge, just adding one division in between, and let's scale it up a little bit. And this is all. Taking another primitive, scale it down a little bit, and let's position it correctly. By selecting the outer edges, I am going to bevel it. Now just select this face and extrude it. Scale it down, and we are done. Just placing another primitive on the top of it. Selecting the top faces, extruding it, scaling it down, once again extruding, pushing it inside, once again extrude, pull it up, once again extrude, scale it down, and once again extrude and push it inside. And we are getting the shape like this. Now by selecting the corner edges, just bevel it and we are getting the shape. Taking another plane, scale it up a little bit, select all the faces and extrude it, pulling it up a little bit to give it a thickness. Now selecting all the hard edges and edit mesh and bevel. And let's position it at the bottom. This is going to be the third layer of this machine. Now let's take a torus. Section radius, let's make it 0.1. And subdivision, let's make it 4. And twist 45 degree. Section radius, reducing it a little bit more. And now selecting all the edges and apply bevel. Now let's position it correctly. Now taking another torus, once again subdivision 4 and twist 45. And let's delete all these faces. Also delete these two. Now select it in object mode, go to mesh and fill hole. Scaling it down in the y-axis. Now let's take a cylinder, positioning it as the head of this shape. Scaling it down a little bit. Let's position it once again. Now I am going to duplicate this primitive only and I will position it in a particular pattern. Now let's come to the perspective and selecting these 4 cylinders and scaling it up a little bit because I am going to subtract it. Now select these two, go to Boolean and union it. Now select the main shape, shift select this cylinder and difference. Okay, and you can see I am getting this particular shape. Selecting this middle edge just to retain the symmetry of this object and going to mesh display and harden edge. Now once again let's write the script poly remesh. R should be capital and it should be ended by the colon. Refine threshold, let's make it 0.3 better and we are getting the symmetry. And reduce threshold, let's make it 5. Now we need to retopo the object, so coming back to write the script once again. Poly retopo, R should be capital, ended by the colon, press enter. You can see we are getting a better topology, but I think we can reduce the polygon up to 600. Now selecting all the hard edges, go to edit mesh and apply bevel. Alright, now let's position the object at its correct place. Alright, now let's create a spring. So going to create polygonal primitive and helix. Going to the inputs, let's increase the coils, decreasing the radius, and let's decrease the subdivision axis to maybe 5. Now going to deform and non-linear deformer and taking a flare and start flare, just increasing it a little bit, and end flare decreasing it, and let's increase the curve a little bit to get a shape like this. Select the object, edit, delete by type, history. Now this is permanent. Now let's position it correctly. That's fine. Now let's model a screw. So taking a cylinder, keeping it aside, scaling it down a little bit, going to the edge component, let's select all the top edges and delete. Now by using multi-cut tool, I am going to draw the topology. Now let's select all the top faces except the middle two lobes, and let's extrude it. Pull it up. Let's scale down a little bit. Now let's select all the hard edges, edit mesh and bevel. Alright, now let's position it correctly. I'm also going to duplicate the same screw and will arrange in different places. This is looking fine. Now let's click on the other parts of the cover. And now we need to create the hinge between the bottom part and the top part of the covers. So for that, first of all, let's do the blocking of the hinge. So I'm starting with a cube. So first of all, placing it properly and scaling it up in the x-axis. So this hinge will be the adjoining area between the top part and the bottom part. So first of all, we have checked the proportion of it. Now increasing the subdivision, and by selecting the vertices, I am giving a little bit curve to this cube. Scaling it up a little bit. So selecting in object mode, and let's create two edge loops, both the sides. Now going to mesh tool and offset edge loop tool I am taking, and both the sides of this particular edge I am creating two edge loops. So through offset edge loop tool we can create two edge loops, both the sides at a similar distance. Now selecting the middle loop and scaling it down a little bit. Now selecting all the hard edges, going to edit mesh and bevel. Alright, select the object, going to mesh and smooth. And you can see we are getting something like this. Maybe two subdivisions will be fine for this. Now select the object, edit and duplicate, and same hinge will be for the second cap also. Let's position it correctly. Alright, this is done. Now next thing, we are going to create a chain, and the chain will be connected with the bottom cover. So we need to block in the connecting area of the chain. So for that, I am starting with a cylinder. Let's rotate 90 degree in the x-axis, scaling it down, and positioning it correctly. Going to the inputs and let's increase the height subdivisions. Selecting the faces and I'm extruding it and pushing it inside to get a shape like this. Now selecting that point, control right click, two faces, and once again extrude. Scaling it down, once again extrude, pulling it out, once again extrude and scaling it up, once again extrude, pulling it forward, and we are getting something like this. Now let's create two loops like this and scaling it up, and we are getting a shape something like this. So this is the block in of this object. Now selecting all the hard edges, edit mesh and bevel, increasing the fraction a little bit, and we are getting a shape like this. That is alright. Now let's create a ring, and for that I am creating a torus, and let's place it properly. Now let's create a cylinder. Rotating it 90 degrees, scaling it down a little bit and place it. Let's go to the inputs of the cylinder and increasing the subdivisions, also decreasing the subdivision axis. Let's make the subdivision height to 3. This is better now. Now selecting these two loops and scaling it up to give a shape like this. Now selecting the hard edges, edit mesh and bevel. Alright, go to mesh and smooth. Now let's select the ring, going to the top view and changing the pivot point somewhere over here, so that we can give an orientation to this ring. Also need to work on the translation. Now selecting this object, let's go back to previous subdivision level and isolate select. Selecting these two vertices, control right click, two faces and extrude it. Scaling it down a little bit, once again extrude and push it inside. Now selecting these two hard edges and bevel it, so that we are getting the room for the ring. It is looking much more convincing now. Alright, now it's time to create the chain. So for that I am going to the top view, I am going to draw a curve with a pencil tool. So this is basically going to be the path of the chain. Alright, going to the vertex and modifying it a little bit so that it will give the appearance that it is starting from that ring. Selecting the curve, going to curve and going to rebuild curve option box. Number of spans, let's make it 20. Now you can see the curve is much more smoother. For chain I am taking a torus. Let's decrease the radius a little bit. Section radius also I am decreasing it. And decreasing the subdivisions also. Now let's scale it down in the x-axis. Once again going to deform, nonlinear deformer and applying a twist. Just rotate it 90 degree. Going to the inputs of the twist and start angle, let's make it 180 degree. Alright, now just select it, edit, delete by type, history. Now I want to replicate this through the path we just have drawn. So for that, select the object, shift select the curve, and let's change to animation module, constraint and motion path, and apply attach to motion path. Reset it and apply. Now the object is selected. I don't want any ease in ease out. So going to animation editor and graph editor and selecting these 2 points and making it linear, and you can see we are getting a straight curve. Now once again select the object, visualize and create animation snapshot. Apply and we are getting something like this because the end time is 10. So let's make it time slider. So now you can see the object is following the entire path, but the increment is too small. So let's increase the increment a little bit, and now you can see it's looking much better. And let's change the up twist a little bit so that it can go through each and every objects. Alright, this is looking fine. Now let's go to the window outliner and selecting all these small objects. Go back to the modeling module, going to mesh and combine. Now by selecting the vertices, I'll modify the shape a little bit so that it can hold the ring. By pressing B in the keyboard, I am getting this soft selection. Alright, so this is done. Now selecting the ring, and I'll duplicate it and will place it at the end of this chain. Alright, so we have done with the modeling and we have done for the day. In the next video, I am going to unwrap it and then I am going to texture it in Substance Painter, and then we'll render it inside Maya by using Arnold. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the future videos, and thank you very much for watching.